I'm not sure that President Avalano and I can be heard.
We're working on it.
You're working on that? Thank you very much. So I met with the developer of the Baylands with Superintendent Presta because previous conversations elicited the idea that Bayshore, because it is within our district boundary, would be allotted land to potentially build a middle school site. And then there would also be part of that parcel to consider building some sort of high school academy, not a full high school, but some sort of smaller high school academy to be an option for students in the area to consider. And he said that planning is proceeding as expected, and that he would expect in the 6-year timeline that they would be able to say, okay, the land is ready for you to develop on. Now, there are other developments happening in the area. So we have the Midway development is finishing phase 1 out of 5 phases, significantly adding housing in our area directly down the block. We also have other housing off of Carter that is being built. And then I know that there are discussions with the Planning Commission to have other housing built, if I'm not mistaken. So the potential for expansion exists, or the need for expansion exists. We don't know what that impact is going to be. We don't know what the families will be in terms of moving in and the needs that they'll present, but we do want to make sure that we can accommodate.
So the reason why I brought up, if you can remember correctly, Rudolph, you were here when Dr. Pittman had this. The agreement to that was kind of in the place that time. Instead of the developer giving us the developer fees, that he was gonna build us the school. Do you remember?
I remember that there was a conversation that occurred. There was nothing in writing.
But would you kind of like, I don't know if it's at the same time.
I mean, there's ways of being creative. I'd say that would be something that we
Right.
probably need to talk about and give our superintendent
An idea,
ideas.
okay.
I'm aware that there's other land here in Bayshore that is state owned. We do also obviously have Cow Palace here, but there's areas on Martin and Carter, which is up the hill, where there is opportunity, but we would have to purchase the land. So, I mean, there's several different options that we can pursue. But I think it's just a matter of us moving forward to kind of get the community involved and get that support.
We just need to buy the corner house.
That is
We're
one
gonna
option.
So, and then there's options of expanding here on site too. So there's obviously, we have a parking lot. We wouldn't lose the parking lot. We would build above. It was brought to my attention that we could build one level higher. But I believe for the elementary, again, we don't know how many kids we're gonna get in the near future. And then how many middle schoolers would also be promoted. So I think it's, we need to look at the numbers. We really need to take a look and see what estimates are out there and projections, so.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like the district has a lot of potential financing needs in the future and different options that it may want to consider. And then to the board member's point, though, I think the first step is to see, has there been any changes in the community support? Are there any concerns? And so doing a voter survey will help us assess that, hopefully. You know, we still have, see the very, very strong support levels that we've seen in that 2014 and 2016 bond measures. But, you know, given where we are in November and getting into the holiday period, you know, probably our best opportunity to be in the field would be in January. when school's back in session and things are a little bit on the normal cycle of things. And so, we can work with the superintendent to develop a set of questions to ask the community. When I talk about a community survey, but it is really geared towards high propensity voters who will, vote in the election. So kind of getting their input about their support levels for a bond measure, tax rate sensitivity, project list, et cetera. So getting, gathering a lot of different information about the voters.
Do we have an idea of what the dollar amount on the parcel tax would be?
So it would not be a parcel tax, this would be a bond, I believe,
Okay.
or I know that Greg showed both, but
Right.
I believe we were talking about a bond. And there is a slide, I wanna say slide 4, that shows different bond proceeds depending on the tax rate per $100,000 anything. Under Prop 39, the maximum is that $30, but we also show lower levels in case there is some tax rate sensitivity in your community.
Thank you.
It goes up to 12.5 million.
Is there any other information that you can provide us prior to what we discuss for meeting further in January? Is there anything that we should be prepared for?
Yeah, I think what we're looking for tonight is a direction for us to, start preparing that survey
Okay.
and for us to, be in the field in January. And I'm sure the superintendent will touch base with the, board again as we get closer to January, but just the direction that we can start that process and putting the questions together and pulling the voter file.
There's no action that we're taking tonight, but I believe we would have to create a resolution, correct?
That's a great question.
Yeah, typically it's just, directions to the superintendent. It doesn't need to be an official action.
Sure.
This is just information gathering, so just,
Perfect.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and then we'll move to item 7B, county certification of the 22-23 unaudited actuals. I'll turn that over to Superintendent Beal.
Yeah, so this is more just for transparency. Our last board meeting occurred before October 18th, so I wanted to share the fact that we received a letter from the county office that specifically SMCOE's Deputy Superintendent of Business Services, Kevin Bultema, confirmed that the county office had reviewed our 22-23 unaudited actuals financial report in accordance with the Code Section 42100 and transmitted the report to the California Department of Education. In our agenda, I provided a copy of that letter and then the unaudited actuals that were certified. So it's more just to show that we're in good standing, that the county has approved it and has passed on their approval to the CDP.
Perfect, thank you so much. And then we're gonna move on to item 8, school reports. We have a presentation here from Jared Prolo, the San Mateo County Office of Education, Executive Director, who's gonna do a presentation.
So thank you, Jared, for joining us. I will just turn it over to you. Jared's going to be sharing an overview of the work that we have started this year and the purpose of building and using a comprehensive assessment plan going forward.
So, thank you, Superintendent Beal. Good evening, trustees of the board and community. I am Jared Perla. I'm the Executive Director of Research and Systems Planning at the county office, which one of the hats that I wear there is really in the sort of testing, measurement, research, reporting sort of area. And especially when we think about schools, I think it's really best to think of it as learning and measurement. I think assessment has a sort of punitive connotation when really we're thinking about like, okay, we want the students to learn, and just like if we want to run faster, we might measure 5K times or, other sorts of things. We really are thinking of this in a measuring point of view. So go to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about what a comprehensive assessment plan means and what the components are, and then in particular how Bayshore is building all of that plan. And this year we're really focusing just on mathematics because last year SMCUE supported Bayshore in adoption of a new mathematics curriculum. And this is sort of the continuation of that and sort of helping make that fit in with understanding how the students are learning. And then we're also going to spend a little time reporting on what the student assessment data is. We're really taking inspiration from the ELA, ELD framework. The frameworks are what tell us how to teach as opposed to like the standards being more what to teach. And in particular, chapter 8, which is all about assessment, is a fantastic sort of guide for how to build all the aspects of an assessment system. On the next slide, there's this lenses image, which I think is super helpful. And I've used this for almost 10 years now, since the ELD framework came out. And this idea that all of these lenses give you a different view about what's happening with students. From the minute by minute, which is listening to student conversation or watching a student work, to that annual summative assessment. And there's also this proximity thing, because the little lenses, like that minute-to-minute daily sort of measurement, is really connected very closely to the individual student. But the annual stuff is really about standards and systems and not as much about individual students. And there is this sort of progression that moves. And so I kind of label these on the next slide of like, each of these assessments has both a focus and a purpose, that teachers are really using that minute-to-minute stuff, but really the schools, districts, and state are the primary users of that statewide assessment data, like the CASP data, and we sort of split in between. One of the mistakes that I think we have made in the past in assessment is thinking that everybody needs to use all of this at all times, and frankly, it's just not appropriate or helpful in all those circumstances. But we do need each of these because, like, we do want to say, like, how are we doing as a state? How are we doing as a county? Like, and see that sort of progress. So on the next slide, we'll talk about those first two lenses, which is that teacher-student interaction, those things that happen primarily in the classroom. And with the math curriculum that was adopted, on the next slide, IM gives the few things that are sort of ready-made. There's these cool downs, which are meant to go along with sort of wrapping up each individual little lesson to sort of check for that understanding. There's those section checkpoints that they prescribe so that after completing sort of a chunk of instruction, we can check in again and say like, okay, how are students coming along? And then the end of unit assessment. And so since these are designed to fit in with the curriculum, it's best practice to then go ahead and use these that are already provided to match up with the instruction that's sort of guided by the curriculum. In that quarterly, this is oftentimes where school districts will work with a vendor to have the sort of 2 to 3 to 4 times a year larger scale assessments that cover a wider range of standards. When we had conversations with Superintendent Beal and Principal McSee, like we really thought that the interim assessments, and if we're go on the next slide, Smarter Balance gives these option for interim assessments. They're smaller packaged assessments, but they're completely in line with the Smarter Balance tools. And one of the things that I think is really helpful about this also is that we're getting an opportunity in a lower stakes situation to have some interfacing with that CASP system. So students who have special needs or defined needs, we can give them those same exact supports on these benchmarks as they will get on CASP, and they can also practice using them, which I think is going to be a really positive thing. So we gave, oh yeah, that's right. I have one caveat here on the next slide, which is good. We do want to stick this pin in the difficulty in assessing young learners. If you've been in the business for a long time, we used to give a state test to second graders. We found out that actually that doesn't tell us very much about second graders learning, because when you put a TK through a second grade student in front of a test independently, you're primarily measuring how well can they interface with that test. That you're not getting a lot of information about their learning, just because it is really challenging for them to interface with something sort of independently. When we talk about assessments for TK through 2, these are much more, teacher side by side with the student and sort of interactive types of assessments that the teacher can observe and ask questions and sort of guide the student a little bit to really truly understand how the student is growing. So it is harder to assess these grades. We're also working on this. We have some performance tasks that our math coordinator, Kim Bambao from the county office, is working with these grade levels on, but they don't aggregate very well. We're still kind of working on those parts, but this is also true of like reading assessments that you can't sit a student necessarily down in front of a computer and get good data. You kind of have to like watch them read. So on the next slide, we have some of the early results. We took the first benchmark a little bit ago, and while these percentages of below standard are pretty high, I don't think that that's cause for alarm because the benchmarks are a wide variety of standards, some of which haven't been taught yet. So it shouldn't be expected that the students are performing very high on those. The near standard and above is actually pretty positive, and there are some really encouraging results overall. However, this isn't really the story from the assessment because it's really about what you do with this data. And on the next slide, we actually have this at every single time we meet with the teachers. If we're going to take the time to give an assessment, you got to use it. Otherwise, you're really just wasting the teacher's time, you're wasting the student's time, and there's no reason for it. So in the case of using these benchmarks, it's really now to go into the system and see like, okay, let's do a little bit of item analysis or distractor analysis. And inside the smarter balanced system, we can see like, okay, on this question, 40% of the class chose this wrong answer. And we can actually look and see like, okay, there's a common misconception among the students about this particular thing. I'm going to have an opportunity to re-engage. And maybe you need a little bit more information because maybe you don't understand why the students necessarily have that same common misconception. But in general, you're going to try and dig down a little bit and find like, okay, I understand there's this misconception. I have this plan of how I might address it. And this feeds directly into the PDSA cycles of like, okay, we see this thing that the students need. I'm going to do this little project around seeing how I can support that. And then we're going to loop back and see how did that go? Did it actually adjust the student understanding in the way that we wanted it to? And so it really fits this benchmark and the common assessments really fit in with the teacher professional development and collaboration around improving the instruction using this cycle structure. As such, we've always aligned it so that whenever we give a common assessment or a benchmark, immediately following, we have meetings with the staff so that they can collaborate and work with us on developing and testing their plans. And then finally, there is that annual summative thing, and we decided that it would be a good idea to give you a little bit of an overview of what we saw in Bayshore's data. For ELA, it was most student groups were flat to above, and I realized I was looking over this just now. I am a bad chart maker. I was supposed to have labels for the years at the bottom. I have unlabeled data here. So I, as a math teacher, will mark myself down for missing information on my charts. But the dot on the left is the student percentage meeting or exceeding in 2022. The dot on the right is each student group meeting or exceeding in 2023. And for English language arts, it stayed pretty flat to slightly moving up, higher percentage students meeting or exceeding standard. This is actually a little bit better than the state and county trend. Statewide and the county trend was for most student groups to be flat to slightly declined. So this is sort of a little bit in opposition to what we saw in the state. Mathematics actually was really positive. These are pretty substantial increases in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding standard. In both cases, we still do see that there are a wide variety of supports that different students need or are receiving, and that is also one of the goals of working on these PDSA cycles, is to see how we can work to close some of those gaps so that it isn't such a widespread based off of different student demographics. But generally, this is actually pretty positive. So a couple of major trends, like I mentioned, slight improvement in ELA, significant improvement in math. This is, it mirrors kind of the trend statewide and countywide. We saw flat ELA to slightly declined and slightly increased performance in math, but I would say that the trends in Bayshore are slightly more positive than what we saw county and statewide. And then the last thing that's always tricky about working with such a small student population is that you're subject to huge variability just because of the amount of impact that one or two students moving in or out of the cohort can have when you have so few students. We do need 30 students to make a statistically significant sample, but really the magic number is more around 150. And in fact, when we have the dashboard release next month in December, there's a different 5x5 chart if you have fewer than 150 students as opposed to if you have more, where they take off the ends of it for fewer than 150, just because they're recognizing that less than 150 is subject to more extreme variations. So really, what we want to do is actually look at kind of like multiple years. So, there's kind of a break in the data because of pandemic, so we don't reach back to 2019, but moving forward, you'll want to sort of stack these years together and then kind of smooth out some of the variation that's going to be inherent to your data. These last charts are ones that I also like to look at, where we're kind of following a cohort of students, and it's a rough cohort. These aren't perfectly matched, but it's looking at students who were 8th graders last year, and then students who were 7th graders the year before. And so it's roughly that cohort of students and seeing how they perform against the standard. And you can see that we kind of shaded out the pandemic years where there wasn't any data, but in ELA, that last year's 8th grade cohort was making steady gains and was getting really close to meeting standard, and then saw some decline in that last year. Kind of the opposite story in mathematics, where, and this is true, the sort of decline from 3rd grade on is something that we see in across the county, and something that Kim, our math coordinator, talk about all the time, is this sort of students getting further away from standard the longer they stay in our math classrooms, which is a countywide trend. But then there was that sort of opposite thing that happened with mathematics. And again, this is a very small student group. This is, if we had more years, you might see more sort of zigzags that we might sort of draw a smoother line between. But I think that it's always interesting to look at this, and I would encourage the community to look at it in future years as well, because we can see this is the actual sort of story of students as they move through the system in relationship to the standard. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Do any board trustees have any questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, just a quick question. I was curious. Are the students considered, is it, I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology, non-duplicated in the data? So if they fall under economically disadvantaged and they happen to be in one of the other categories, they would not be included in both.
You are correct that there are duplicates. So a student who is Hispanic Latino will be in that line, and if they're socioeconomically disadvantaged, they will also be in that.
Okay.
So yeah, it is one of those that like you're counted wherever you're counted, and so
Okay.
some people are on there twice.
I got a question. How does a standards-based grading align with the goals and principles of the CAS assessment?
That's a good question. So I think that the biggest thing with standards-based grading is that you're really, it's really looking at mastery of each sort of individual standard. And I have to admit, I don't have deep familiarity with Bayshore's report card. I know that in San Mateo Foster City, when we built the standards-based report card, we actually sort of clustered some of the standards together, because marking on every single standard is actually in some ways a little bit tedious. But I would say that where they match up very well is in that CASP does a very good job of measuring what student understanding is on the body of the standards. And so it is a highly aligned, and there's a lot of very good validity studies that they publish each year about how well aligned and how reliable it is in measuring student understanding of standards. Where it differs is that because CASP only has 1 to 3 questions per standard, it can't tell you if a student really has mastered an individual standard, right? And that's where we really need the teacher expertise to really dig in a little bit deeper to say like, okay, yeah, this student is either on the path to mastery or has mastery of this sort of individual level.
as we understand in our classrooms, there's students at every level. And that's where we have to learn how to meet their needs during, these assessments and setting these goals. Is there any other questions that the board trustees have?
Well, again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I'm just curious about cross-referencing this with ADA data. So if you wanted to exclude students that happen to have chronic absenteeism, to look at the data without that population, could that be done? What is the various ways of slicing and dicing the data?
That is an interesting question, and there are ways to do that using Data Zone. And so I can connect with the administration and kind of tweak some of those things. I think that is also part of the plan this year, is for me to work with the administration a little bit more on really utilizing Data Zone to the fullest once we get all of the sort of assessment data into it, so we can build those sort of customized reports and sort of post questions and say like, oh, I have this hypothesis, let's see if it's there. The one thing I will say is that at this level, the sort of CASP and sort of, it might give you a hint. You probably have to sort of dig a little bit deeper to know for sure. It's not going to be sort of like enough to prove that like something is or isn't.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Perlo, for your
Thank you for
presentation tonight. All right, moving on to the next item, 9,
Thank you.
school reports. Superintendent reports. I'll turn this over to Superintendent Beal.
Okay, so I just have 3 updates to share, and I'm really acting as the messenger because all 3 of these things are very exciting things that I didn't do. So I want to give credit to people who are leading this. So the first one is the block party that we all enjoyed. Was it last week? 2 weeks ago?
The 28th.
The 28th, thank you. So I have a report that you have a copy of from the PTO board president, Alalea Cabilas. I think I'm saying that correctly, I don't know. So I will read what she has here. She wanted to extend her gratitude and for the time and effort that the block party committee put into making it a successful event. Staff, parents, students, and alumni were all involved on the committee and bringing a significant amount of time to making sure that it was successful. So great appreciation goes out to them. We had families that donated a variety of supplies like water, candy, decorations. So it truly was a community effort. I had asked what kind of fundraising, because this is a fundraiser of sorts, really more of a focus on community togetherness, but there's an aspect of fundraising. So we did have Cold War Banker Realty. We have a gentleman, Herb Ng, who contributed $500, and Papa Ray's Pizza, just around the corner, also contributed food to our staff and volunteers, which is always greatly appreciated. Leo and Roby Cabilas for making sure that the shuttle service was available. Attendees made a difference by showing support and undoubtedly contributing, of course, to the event's success. And the total amount raised was $1,198 from the food vendor donations. We received a portion of the proceeds from the money they collected. And the City of Daly City recognized the 4th annual block party as part of their commendation. That was announced at the event, and there's a copy of the certificate there. So really huge appreciation goes out to everyone for bringing our community together and celebrating. And the weather was lovely, and so that was really fun. And I wanted to bring attention to that. We also have a first time event for a fundraiser, and I got questions from some community members and some board members in terms of what the fundraising this year from the PTO is focused on. So I wanted to share what was shared by the PTO with the staff recently. So the fundraising efforts will go to cover several things, one of which was the block party. We have a spring festival, that's also a community gathering event. And so the planning and things that go into making that happen is something that fundraising will go towards. General PTO operations is another, something that was highlighted. Staff appreciation, 8th grade send-off, school field trips activities, and then there's a parent/teachers night out. I don't know what that is, but evidently if we have enough fundraising, there might be an event that involves parents and teachers, which could be really fun. So those are the things that are highlighted from fundraising, and we have a fundraiser called the PTO Fun Run that's coming up next week, actually, which is going to involve different groups of students, different clusters of students going out to the yard. They're collecting either per lap or general donations with a goal of raising $30,000. And so it'll be a fun event where the kids go out to the yard and do their laps. There'll be lots of staff from the Fun Run organization out there cheering people on and taking pictures. So it looks potentially to be quite the event next week. Let's hope the weather holds up. I know there is rain coming in the forecast, so we'll see how that goes. And then the last thing that's happening next week is parent-teacher conferences, which is something that I shared with the staff was really an important event for me as a parent, especially being one who's dedicated their lives to education and supporting the education of other students. It was a time for me to really connect with my children's teacher and find out how I could support their development along with the team at the school. So we'll have our parent-teacher conference week next week. And so it's a minimum day every day next week so that our staff can meet with teachers and share the celebrations and the next steps for continuing to grow this school year. So a lot going on.
Great. The board trustees have any questions? Over these items?
Yeah, just if you sign up for the fun run, I'll sign up for the
Let's
fun.
do it. Do we have to wear costumes?
No.
With regards to the fun run, how much money has been raised so far?
I can tell you that, I just looked that up. We have raised over $17,000.
Yeah.
And when does that end?
The 15th is the end of,
Okay.
well, you know, I'm not sure, sometimes it's not per lap. I don't think it's per lap.
Isn't it optional?
Is it optional?
It's like,
Anyway.
I think
I
it
am
said
not
it
the
was.
one to ask. I
If
made
anyone-
the assumption that it was
Sometimes
either per lap or.
I'm sorry, if
straight
anyone
donation.
wants to speak, we can have you come to the podium.
There's no microphone. Yeah, I forgot what it says, say, we're all good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, mine has been, they're doing a great job. Oh, what I was saying is that my children's school does this, and there is sometimes donations are left open even after the fun run has finished. I don't know if we're doing that.
Perfect. So rain or shine, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I
Thank you.
will, if I could just add, just
Go ahead.
in the side, just because I see Ms. Bradbury there. It's been very fun seeing how competitive some of our staff has become and their just general excitement as they're picking up the little incentive things that are left in the office. So I'm looking forward to it.
Great. And this is a Bayshore PTO sponsored event, which is great. Awesome. Well,
And
thank
I like how it has, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I like how it has a physical activity versus like the candy or the gift wrap or whatever. It has the combination of some fitness, but also, the community support. So thank you
So
for leading in this direction.
Our administrators get to put their running shoes on as well, or? Yeah. This is,
Always
it's a
wearing
team
running
effort
shoes,
event,
what are you
right?
talking about? Always got them on.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Bill, for your report. Moving to item 10, board member reports. I'll start off at the very end with trustee Cavanero.
Just wanted to touch base on the block party. It was just thank you to PTO and all the contributors for creating such a wonderful event. It's always amazing to see the event grow with more vendors and more people and attendees each year. So it was great. And I look forward for everything else that follows, like the spring festival. I like community gatherings.
Great. Trustee Brown.
Yeah, so to piggyback on trustee Cavanero, that was a great event at the block party. I'm glad to be a part of it. I hope to see next year, we add some health-related vending opportunities. And I will speak up for the next upcoming meetings that we do that. And I enjoyed it. So, and also I just wanted to report that last night at the Cow Palace, there was an event. It's put on by the Renaissance Center, sponsored by Daly City as well. And it was a very great event. It's called Passion to Profit Conference. So it could bring opportunities for community members who are maybe thinking about entrepreneurship or even just to enhance businesses that are already in the Bayshore area. I think Vice Mayor Jocelyn Manalo was there, as well as Pam Giovanni. And it was a very nice event. So if anybody wants to see this, it's right here. I was only there for a few minutes because I had other obligations. But a pretty good turnout.
Thank you. Trustee Rudolph.
No, I just wanted to reiterate the sentiments about all the hands that contributed to the block party. And thank you for putting in the blood, sweat, and tears to make it as successful as it was, and especially just a shout out to our partners at Jefferson Union High School District for being here and being present and taking time out of their busy schedules to set up a tent and be available to students and families. So thank you.
And Trustee Falcoa.
Okay, I just sent you guys a flyer. So for Pitt's Christmas giveaway this year, we're not taking any paper registration. Everybody has to go on the website and then scan the code. So they're gonna have to fill up the application online. We finally did something right this time. So it's gonna be on the December 16th, and the time, everything is on there. It's drive-by, drive-through only, and it's from 9 to 12. I just hope all our ages from newborn to 16 years old. So, and Mr. Ruda's band is gonna play that.
Not my, I've been invited to sit in with
Well, you,
reverse DNA to
that would be fun.
play some carols and whatnot.
For the, I think, I just remember we have our home now, so I don't think I'll let you know. We're gonna be using the facility to set up. We're probably going to set up there and then offload everything here, the bags ready to,
Oh, okay,
but I'll let you know
okay.
for that. Something in my head. So I was here at the block party and just standing around, it's interesting, just stand around and just like you be around everybody, not knowing who you are. And then just hearing the conversations from certain people, they're like, oh, this year is more organized now. So I was like, oh, that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. There were a lot of the food. Didn't have time to taste any of the food, but it was a good turnout. Parking was terrible, as
No
always. Yeah, but there was a shovel. Yeah, but I was able to find parking right in front of here. I just want to hear from our neighbors to see how they, they feel about it with that day, you know, like how they feel about having all the parking taken from them on the weekend. I want to thank all the staff that were involved from the PTO and all the staff and also some of our students were involved in volunteering. It will get better and better every year. I'm looking forward to teachers' conferences. I have a suggestion for our students that are gonna go to, that are shadowing at other schools. So maybe next year, we should have a shuttle or we should have a van to transport those students to those schools, those high schools that they're going to. I mean, I had to pay Uber for my nephew to go to schools, you know, but I'm like, we should do something about that. Maybe not this year, but next year. And having them going to those schools and visit those schools, it's beautiful. That's it for me. Well, you're gonna touch on, have some interesting people that we met.
I just want to echo the sentiments of my fellow board members. Yeah, the block party. I personally know how much work it takes, and I was very impressed to see again. You know, this is the 4th annual Bayshore block party, and all the support. You know, I was excited to see a bunch of our teachers on the committee really putting all their efforts into making this successful. Obviously, the PTO board had a lot to kind of pull things together, and we had a lot of students involved who we had alums that donated their time and volunteered. And there was just various peoples at all different levels to make sure this event went smooth. So again, we look forward to it every year. You know, I do like to see more focus on our students. You know, before there was a block party, it used to be a fall festival, and it was more geared towards our students. So maybe that's something we can incorporate in the future. But again, another successful event, and very proud that everyone enjoyed it. I also want to thank Mr. Waterman for the generous donation. And I think he's been doing this for how many years?
Whatever.
Yeah. So he's donated monies to our library. He's donated money to support some of our families and students. And again, we want to thank him for his donations and wish him very well. I know, like what was mentioned with teacher, parent, and student conferences this coming week, it's exciting. It's exciting to see how our educators and our parents are going to communicate and for the benefit of our students' achievement. It's very important how we lay out the groundwork for the success, and I know the staff are doing hard work to prepare for next week. So I commend you all for the work that you're putting in. I know we have board members have the AEC conference coming up at the Moscone
Oh, yes.
this year. Most of us will all be attending, and it's an opportunity for us to get more knowledge of how we can be better as board members. And that's what the whole idea of these conferences is, to engage and get a better understanding of how we can do better in our districts and meet others and communicate with, you know, how they're doing in their districts. But it's always a great event. I experienced it last year in San Diego and looking forward to it since it's here in San Francisco this year. Also, Teresa and I met with a local company who will be taking up an area where the old Geneva Drive-In is, and it's a battery storage company. It's called Airvin. We had a very successful meeting, more like a greet and meet. And we put a lot of items on the table that would benefit our community, especially our school district and our students. So there's many more conversations that will be had. And they plan to be here for a very long time. So there'll be future items on the agenda that will probably invite them to come and do a presentation so the community and our district can get an idea of what they're proposing and how they can support the community. And last but not least, Thanksgiving holiday is coming up. I know we're all looking forward to a mini vacation. And I can see individuals dancing in the back there. This is always a great thing. And we just want to wish everyone a nice, safe holiday. I know tomorrow's Veterans Day. I think you guys deserve that one as well. But Thanksgiving is a time where we can reflect and be with our families and kind of rejuvenate and get back into the grind and finish out the year. So again, just want to wish everyone a great time spending time with their families. With that being said, I'll ask Superintendent Bill if there's anything she'd like to add.
No, I think everyone said anything I
All
was
right.
gonna say.
With that being said, I'll adjourn this meeting at 7:21, and we'll take a 5-minute break and go into closed session.
So then